Think about all the animals we share our world with today. Out of every single species early humans encountered across the ancient world, we're talking not horses, not cows, not even our fellow primates. It was the wolf that ultimately became our absolute closest companion. So, in this explainer, we're going to explore exactly how a terrifying apex predator slowly transformed into the best friend that's probably sitting right next to you on the couch. To really wrap our heads around the sheer scale of this partnership today, just consider this number: 900 million. That is how many dogs are on Earth right now. They're literally everywhere we are. They sleep right in our beds. They aggressively guard our homes. They sniff out bombs, herd sheep, and yeah, they even rescue people from avalanches. And of course, they also wear little birthday hats while sitting patiently next to dog-friendly cakes. They are completely woven into the everyday fabric of modern human society. But what's truly mind-blowing here is the absurd contrast between our past and our present. If you were a human living, say, 30,000 years ago, hearing wolves at night meant extreme danger. You were dealing with highly coordinated pack hunters with massive jaws, terrifying physical endurance, and eyes that worked way, way better in the dark than yours ever could. Yet today, their descendants are playing fetch in the park and sleeping on our pillows. The sheer evolutionary leap from a hyper-lethal pack hunter to a fluffy companion is just staggering. Section 1. Monsters in the Dark. Let's travel back to the Ice Age for a second and set the scene. To truly appreciate the magnitude of this shift, we really need to establish just how dangerous these original wolves were to early hunter-gatherers. Just imagine the world 20 to 40,000 years ago. Humans lived in tiny bands, maybe 20 to 50 people, moving constantly across these enormous, freezing landscapes. Life was brutal. Winter killed constantly. Something as simple as a broken leg, that could easily mean death. Humans were relatively small, pretty slow, and constantly surrounded by predators that could smell them from miles away. And right at the edge of every single human camp, just barely outside the safety of the firelight, the wolves waited. Human survival back then was a constant, terrifying struggle. Section 2. The accidental domestication. And this brings us to a major twist in our story, because as much as we humans absolutely love to think of our own ingenuity solving all our problems, we never actually set out to invent dogs. There was no grand master plan here. This brilliantly illustrates the filter of evolution in action. The whole process started simply because, well, humans are incredibly messy eaters. Even when starving, ancient humans left behind bones and scraps and skins. Now, to a wolf, a human camp was basically a moving pile of free calories. At first, aggressive wolves that got too close, they were speared. The terrified wolves, they stayed far away and got nothing. But a few wolves, the ones born a little less fearful and just slightly more curious, crept in. They didn't hunt us. They just ate our leftovers. Wolves essentially started domesticating themselves just by exploiting our messy habits, filtering their own populations for friendliness. Section 3. How tameness changed bodies. So let's look at how this builds into what scientists actually call domestication syndrome. This is where a profound change in an animal's personality actually begins to physically alter their body. Now you might be wondering, how does a behavioral shift change biology? Well, scientists literally watched this happen in real time. In 1959, a Soviet geneticist named Dmitry Belayev started an experiment in Siberia with foxes. He didn't train them, he didn't teach them tricks. He simply selected and bred only the tamest, least aggressive foxes, generation after generation. Within just a few decades, these foxes started acting exactly like dogs. They were wagging their tails, whining for attention, licking hands. But then, and this is the wild part, their physical bodies bizarrely began to change as well. So the absolutely crucial takeaway here is that breeding purely for less aggression automatically resulted in these bizarre, softer physical features. When animals become less aggressive, their appearance often changes right along with it. The foxes and those ancient proto-dogs developed floppy ears, much shorter snouts, patchy white fur, and softer, more juvenile-looking faces. Just imagine standing in an Ice Age camp and seeing wolves that looked slightly smaller and just less terrifying. They definitely weren't pets yet, but they were no longer fully wild monsters either. Section 4. An ancient survival partnership. Now, this newfound proximity wasn't just some one-sided scavenging operation. It really quickly turned into a mutual relationship that dramatically improved the odds of survival for both species in a deeply hostile world. The proto-dogs, they got free, reliable calories, the warmth of the campfires, and stable shelter.
But humans got something equally invaluable in return. These animals became living, breathing alarm systems. They could hear and smell approaching bears or hostile strangers from huge distances. They could track prey far better than any human could even dream of. Humans with dogs simply survived better than humans without them. And remarkably, this partnership happened way before we domesticated sheep, way before goats, and long before farming was even a concept. As human history progressed, the biological commitment of dogs only deepened. When humans eventually did invent agriculture and started eating diets that were super heavy in grains, dogs actually changed their biology again. They gradually evolved the ability to digest starch far better than wild wolves ever could. Think about how extraordinary that is. They adapted their very digestive systems just to stay alongside us as our societies fundamentally changed. They were surviving with us before the invention of writing, before the very first cities, and before the pyramids were even a thought. Section 5. The biology of love. Over thousands of generations, this relationship went way beyond mere utility. We're now going to see how survival evolved into a profound, measurable biological bond. This brings us to a fascinating biological reality. Did you know that when humans and dogs stare into each other's eyes, both species release a hormone called oxytocin? This is literally the exact same hormone deeply involved in the bonding process between parents and their children. Wild wolves, they do not naturally do this with humans. But your dog staring lovingly at you? That is not just some random behavior. Evolution literally shaped their brains and ours to connect emotionally. They even evolved specific facial muscles for those famous puppy dog eyes, just to trigger a nurturing response in us. It's an evolutionary hack. However, we do have to acknowledge that this domestication eventually came with a fairly tragic cost. While the ancient natural partnership was entirely mutually beneficial, modern human breeding practices over the last few centuries have caused some severe health issues for many specific breeds. By heavily selecting for extreme aesthetic traits, dogs unfortunately lost much of their wild resilience. Today, pugs often struggle just to breathe. Dachshunds frequently develop severe spinal problems due to their artificially elongated backs, and some bulldog breeds literally can't even give birth naturally without medical intervention. And yet, despite the floppy ears, the starch digestion, and all those modern health issues, the ancient instincts totally still survive. You know when your dog spins around in circles a few times before lying down on the living room rug? They're actually acting out an ancient instinct to flatten tall grass. When they try to bury a toy in the couch cushions, or when they twitch and run in their sleep, they're echoing the behaviors of their ancestors. The shadow of the Ice Age predator still lives inside every tiny chihuahua and every fluffy husky. I really want to slow down here for a second because archaeology has revealed something truly profound about this bond. In Germany, archaeologists found a grave that is roughly 14,000 years old. Inside were a man, a woman, and a dog buried carefully beside them. But here is the truly amazing part. The dog had suffered from a severe illness as a puppy, but it survived for weeks or maybe even months afterward. What does that mean? It means that starving Ice Age humans who are struggling to survive in an incredibly harsh environment spent precious food, time, and energy nursing a sick animal. That is no longer just a working partnership. That is deep attachment, friendship, and undeniably love. From dangerous predators lurking at the edge of our campfires, all the way to the devoted companions snoring loudly on our couches, this accidental journey has changed both of our species forever. So I'll leave you with this thought to take away from our explainer today. When you look at the fluffy companion sleeping in your living room tonight, can you see the ancient monster that stepped out of the dark and helped shape the very course of human history?